Anyway, that little incident with somebody looking for Mary Jane is just part of the whole thing of being live at the gallery.
This is a working art place.
Yes,
Manley
right,
Art
and they're
Center
working next door
is
right
a
as we
working
speak.
art place. Yes.
So Christina, I want to get back to the question that I gave you that was interrupted.
Oh, what was that?
And that was your education background in drafting, in mechanical drawing, I think.
Yes.
And how that worked out making a transition from that to fine arts.
Well, it was really a concentrated effort because I was trained as a teenager there were no art classes in my high school, so I took drafting. And then a gentleman came and talked about becoming technical illustrator, and he said, CAD systems are coming into being and it'll be a whole new technology, but it'll be, there will still need to be illustrators to do ink-line drawings. So I was trained to take little machines and explode them and draw exploded assemblies and call out all the tolerancing. It was kind of an engineering kind of training. So when I did start to create, I had to retrain myself to get sloppy and not have perfect lines and all of that. So I think the part of my brain that is the most viable right now is the right side, and I had to train.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think the use of the word sloppy sounds slightly negative, but I interpret it as creative.
Yes.
And not, like you said, not to be bound by the lines,
Yes.
to paint outside the lines, to draw outside the lines, color outside the lines.
I was actually discouraged from being sloppy by my mother. That was the other aspect. It was like the forbidden fruit to create, because she said, you might end up impractical, you might not be able to support yourself, which was wrong. I have been practical and support myself. She was pleasantly surprised, I think, I hope. But,
So did you have a eureka moment when all of a sudden this style happened, or was it a gradual transition? How did that work?
My eureka moment was sitting talking about something difficult on the phone, and my two children had their watercolor sets out, and I picked up a brush and just started doodling, and it was a charged issue, and I felt myself go, and I could think better, and I could, get through what I was needing to get through, and I thought, I better keep doing this. So that was my eureka moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what was the next step after that? Do you remember what that was?
Well, I'm stuttering. Sorry.
What happened to that articulateness?
Oh, well, it comes and goes,
Okay.
The next step was that I had to support myself, so I got a teaching credential, and I was the sloppy teacher. I taught second grade, and I was the sloppy teacher. I had to inform the parents that if you need to ask for your child to be transferred to another classroom, we're going to be wearing big shirts and making a mess during art time. So if you don't approve of that, find another teacher. And there never was anybody that asked to, find a different teacher, but I wanted to prepare the parents. So I did that, and then I got interested in more of the early childhood aspect of child development, and I went back and trained to be a school administrator and directed a nonprofit for 10 years before I moved to Brookings. So none of this was related to art, although I always painted at night. I always had a day job, I always painted at night. I'm not trained at all. I don't know what I'm doing, I just do it.
You're right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, go ahead, Rachel. Rachel has a question.
Yes,
by the way.
Rachel.
You're allowed.
My question is that what is so special about your work is that it's a narrative art. It's a form of narrative art. And I'm interested in how you come up with all the stories for every one of your paintings, because they all tell a story.
Well, a lot of them are based on feelings or experiences or places that I've been that have influenced me. Sometimes dreams. Sometimes I just think, well, I feel like painting, I don't know, some chicks on the beach, and then I do it. I still don't do any plein air painting. I'm raising a 10-year-old, so I have kind of a vigorous lifestyle, not related to art. Yeah, I paint what I feel like painting at the time.
So would you say it comes from your experiences or your imagination?
Both.
Both,
Yeah.
but like a mixture?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
And to get back to the working with children,
Mhm.
I think you gotta say there's a childlike quality in your style of painting, and I would imagine that may have come from that era, but that's just me, you know.
Well, I relate pretty well to them. That part of me probably didn't mature.
Okay, now, the pieces here, they all look like they're, except for the dimensional pieces, the glass pieces, they all look like they're acrylic on canvas, is that correct?
Yes, for this show, yes. In the corner, there's something on glass, painted on two sides of glass. But generally speaking, yes, I do mostly acrylic on canvas.
And when you do watercolor, how does that happen, or what's your motivation for doing a watercolor piece? Is
Well,
there?
I just feel like painting in watercolor that day.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And we have glass pieces here
Mhm.
that you've painted on,
Yes.
but you also mentioned in your bio that you like to paint on everything and anything.
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite other thing besides canvas that you paint on?
I like to paint on cloth. I like to do paint on clothing. And I've done some mural work, not a lot, but some. But I don't know. What was your question?
My question was, what are the other things that you paint on? Like you
Yeah.
do t-shirts.
Yes.
I mean, do you have a favorite other thing beside the two things here, the glass and the acrylic on canvas?
I think acrylic on canvas is my favorite.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, very good.
Thank you, Pete.
There is another, you have a piece of artwork that's painted G clay, and I'm
Yes.
wondering if you can explain that for.
Yeah, it's
a
just
viewer.
sort of a another level in my marketing approach. I have many levels. I have free stuff. I have something for $1, something for $5, something for $10. So just about anyone can afford a piece of my artwork should they want one. So another tier to that would be then prints on paper, which I use for my note card line. I have about 480 images on my note card line. And then the next one is G-clays, which are captures on usually canvas or paper, where they use actual pigments, where actual pigments are used. And then the next level to that is painted G-clays, which it kind of turns back into an original piece of artwork, but you have your image from a painting you've already done, and then it adds more dimension, and it's just another option, and it's another way for someone to have an original piece of artwork that's not an original, and then there are the original artworks as well.
So you have the G clay, and then you went back and painted
Yeah.
on the G clay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's.
To kind of pop it and give it more, well, it turns into its own painting that way.
And that
Yeah.
reminds me, there are some artists who will paint one painting, and then they'll paint over it deliberately and do a whole different style, maybe an abstract over a realistic painting.
Mhm.
And that's part of their process. So
Mhm.
this sounds a little bit like it.
Mhm.
One of the things I forgot to do when I first introduced you was to talk about you splitting your time between here and Santa Cruz. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that and how you see, first of all, different markets for
Mhm.
art, and also, does it change your art when you're painting there or painting here?
Not at all. The reason that I'm in Santa Cruz, I'm raising a 10-year-old who needs to have his education in Santa Cruz. He has some educational needs that need to be fulfilled. I have a little studio there. My focus when I'm there is his education. Periodically I'll hang artwork in they have an open studio there. I used to be involved in. Now, once in a while, they have an art walk where I'll hang in some venue. But usually my focus when I'm in Santa Cruz is on Blaze, who, by the way, is the youngest artist at Brian Scott Gallery. He's also a painter.
And how old is he again?
He's 10 now.
Oh, okay.
He's been an artist in Brian Scott Gallery since he was 5.
I think
When you first interviewed him.
I think I remember, yeah, and
yeah.
I did that interview.
Yeah, so my focus when I'm there is his education and his well-being, and then I have also other family members who need some emotional support. So, and I'm a gypsy, I don't mind the drive, and periodically his auntie or one of our relatives will stay with him there, and I get to come up here and have time off from the parenting role. Woohoo!
Yeah.
And I try to come to Brookings once a month, and when Art Walk is happening, be at Brian Scott Gallery for Art Walk. But I've been pretty invisible at Manley Art Center because of my vigorous lifestyle.
And what are you working on right now?
Right now, what am I working on? Right now, well, I just finished my 4th ink line drawing pages to coloring book on cardstock, and produced that. I'm working on a still life with, it's called Love Potion, and it's a recreation of a painting that I already did that sold right away, and I missed it, so now I'm recreating it.
What's the subject of that still life?
Wine glasses, grapes, and a bottle of wine.
Well, normally, if there were an art walk, we'd have those objects here.
We would have those objects here, yes we would.
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
And what about, do you have any plans, any goals for the future about your art, or what you want to do with it, where you want to go with it?
No, I just want to enjoy painting, and once outdoor shows are happening again, participate in those. There's a very fun show that friends and I are in near Selma, Oregon.
Okay, right.
Yes.
I know the one.
Kirby, Oregon, and it's called Oktoberfest, and that's one of my favorite venues as well. My friends and I stay in a winery in cavort afterwards, so that's pretty fun. And I enjoy socializing with a whole other group of artists. I enjoy socializing with all of the artists at Brookings as well. Everybody has a story to tell, and I love those stories.
And I think we all miss the art walks, and hope that they can come back again in April. At least that's a target date. Now, whether it's going to happen or not,
that would be really wonderful.
That would be really wonderful.
Yeah.
Rachel, how about you? Any more questions for Christina? Because I've kind of run out, which is unusual for me, because I could usually keep talking.
Well, I guess my last little idea is I'd love to know a little bit on your technique and how you paint. If you could maybe describe, when you're in your studio, like what's your process, and what's your favorite paints? Do you have a certain color you really like, or?
Well, I like the golden acrylics a lot. And my process is usually a few thumbnail sketches, usually just doodles. I might be just, I'll say, oh, I like that. And I have a file of ideas. I have a really big ideal file based on doodles and things. So if I'm going to create a piece of work, first of all, I have a lot of disasters. So then in a hidden area of my studio in Brookings, I have what I call a bone pile, and it's just like all these disasters that I have to revisit and see if they can be resuscitated or not. So every painting isn't a success, and I'm okay with that. But if I'm going to start creating, usually I lay in some sort of a neutral background color, and then I usually use some sort of a broad tip neutral color that shows up on that background to do my sketch based on my thumbnail. And then if it's like, for example, the ocean or the forest or something, then I work from the back to the front, if it's one of my other crazy pieces, sometimes I don't do that. I don't follow the rules. Sometimes I don't know how I actually paint it. It just paints itself, and I don't know if I'm completely responsible for that or not. But it usually starts with a thumbnail sketch and laying out the image, and then building up the color and letting it sit for a while to make sure, squinting at it a lot, taking it maybe a photograph of it to see where the weak areas are, and just knowing when it's done is also a learning curve, because I have overpainted many a time. So
I think we've all done that.
yeah,
And
so you have to be able to stop yourself, which is hard sometimes.
by the way, I'd like to digress for a second on that thing that you mentioned about not feeling that you did it, that it just
Yeah.
came from somewhere
Sometimes
else.
it
And
just
Rachel,
feels
I
like
think
that.
you've probably had that feeling too, and I've had that, and it's just a wonderful feeling. Like
Yeah.
you feel, I didn't do that. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's where you're getting really lost in
Yeah,
the art.
and it's very hypnotic sometimes hearing the brush kind of go whoosh on the canvas. It's, I don't know. Then usually my child is hungry and I have to stop, but that's okay too.
That reminds me of the quote from Alexander Calder. Somebody asked him, how do you know when you're done with a piece? And he said, when it's dinner time.
Mhm.
So that
That's
sounds
amazing.
very apropos.
Yeah.
And how long would you say a painting takes?
Anywhere from one evening to maybe a week.
Okay.
I'm not very precious with them. I just slap them out.
And actually, that sounds fairly typical.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of my time range
Oh, is
too.
it? I didn't know
And
that.
I think a lot of artists are like that. Some of the bigger pieces are more complex. I may have spent 3 weeks on them, but not much more than that.
Mhm. Is it a wrap?
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe summarize, just.
Well, anyway, just to wrap up, we've completed this segment with featured artist Christina Olsen in the Manley Art Center. And this is the first and hopefully last time we have to do this, but if we do have to do it again, we will do it. It was fun to do it this way, and I hope it was fun for people to watch.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.